Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another of the United Workers' Party roundtable discussion. And today we have as our main issue economic issues that touches and concerns citizens of St. Lucia. With me, I have my co-host, Laura Jean-Pierre, and of course we have two interesting panelists. First of all, I would like to mention that we have Guy Joseph, the Deputy Political Leader, former Minister of Government, and former parliamentarian for Castries Southeast, and to add a professional dimension to our discussion today, considering the fact that we're focusing not solely but mainly on economic issues, we have here with us Frank Myers, a chartered accountant. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, especially those of you watching online and those of you in the diaspora. I'm hoping that we'll have another very interesting discussion that will serve to enlighten and inspire St. Lucians, hopefully. So, before we begin, let me just say welcome to my co-host, Laura, and a special welcome to you, Guy, and Frank. I hope you don't mind me calling you by your first name. We are very informal on the roundtable discussion. So, ladies and gentlemen, to kick things off, we have a very special guest, and like I said, he is here to add the professional dimension. Usually we have the politicians, but you know, as things go, we always want to get another perspective, that from experts in the various fields that we discuss. And so, for this reason, Frank, we have you here today. And there are a number of issues that have been in the news of late, current matters of concern to St. Lucians. For example, the economic situation in terms of high cost of living, the levy, the 2.5% levy that has been imposed for security and health. And we want to find out from you, what is your perspective in terms of the impact it has on the economy, and more particularly on the individual in St. Lucia?
Good evening, viewers, good evening, fellow panelists. In respect of the economy of St. Lucia, I think I can best give an example of the way it has been felt on the street in St. Lucia. I was in a supermarket last week, a place I don't often go, and these days when I do go, I spend longer than I do because I actually check prices, something I don't normally do. But I was quite taken aback when a lady walked up to me and asked me whether I could sponsor her a bottle of peanut jam, peanut butter. And I thought she was kidding at first, and I treated it like a joke and said, she was serious. I mean, this gives you an indication. If people find themselves in positions where they do something like this, then it's clear something has to be wrong. Now, the thing is, we must realize is that given where we're coming out of, which was COVID, it is not surprising that things are kind of hard. It happens globally for a variety of reasons. But the disappointing thing in St. Lucia here is that no consideration seems to have been given towards the government of the day paying heed to the cries we hear coming from, for example, the managing director of the IMF, the World Bank, etc., and so on, indicating that the government should really be taking care of the vulnerable people within their communities. And basically what we're saying here is that our policies should be geared towards alleviating the conditions that are existing on the ground, and it seems to me there that in many cases we're simply not going in that direction. Thus the reason you hear persons crying about prices, etc., and so on. Now, in which the fuel situation is one that comes to mind fairly easily, because we, for a long time now, we have been operating at a fairly high retail prices for the petroleum products. Now, remember at one time it was pretty high on the world market, and this, I suppose, is what drove the initial high prices. But once the prices started to fall, unfortunately, we did not get the benefit of the falling price at the world market, and we had this accumulation of profits, if you will, in the hands of government. Now, when the prices were going up, companies in countries like, for example, the UK, they generated what is referred to as windfall profits, in that they were getting revenues for doing nothing, in a sense. The market was simply pouring money into them. And the UK applied what is called a windfall tax on those profits, and these taxes will continue a couple of years into the future. Thus, the government gets some funds from those companies so that they can now take up some of the social issues that are going on. In St. Lucia now, it seems the reverse has happened. The governments have picked up that windfall tax, and that windfall tax apparently is not being applied to those persons, and thus you have some of the issues we have for the day. So it does take a lot of maneuvering, if you will, for us to get through these times. And the danger is that things happen that we have no control over at all. For example, this issue in the Middle East, where we have the war between in the Gaza and Israel, things like that pop up all the time. And when that happens, countries like ours, if we don't get ourselves online fairly quickly, we actually find ourselves with the compounding of these disasters. So ultimately, the people at the bottom end of the scale suffer quite a lot. I don't think that we ever quite came out of the 2008 financial crisis, and then we were hit with Thomas, and now we've been hit with the Ukraine war. Now we've been hit with what's happening in Israel. So we've got to have policies that benefit everybody equally right across the board, if you will. And if we don't do that, ultimately we'll find ourselves in a fairly deep hole it'll be impossible to get out of. Countries like ours, a growth rate of about 2-3% per year is nothing really to boast about. I think I heard it said that for us to really do well, we must have consistent growth in the region of 10% per annum, which is something that you only really get when you've got a hole in the ground that spouts oil, gold, or some such thing. I think other than that, we're going to find ourselves really struggling, and the government of the day must be challenged to take care of the people, because otherwise we're going to be in for some serious trouble.
Now, Mr. Myers, I know Spider said we're very informal around here, but I've known you so long, I can't call you Frank.
Try.
To be frank. So it's going to be Mr. Myers for me. I hear you talk about those on the periphery and those in the lower income bracket, and how the IMF has implored for governments to take care of those people, because let's face it, they're the ones that are most affected. Here we have a government that has said to us, the populace, the citizenry, that VAT was an onerous tax, that it affects mostly the people, the lower income bracket. And now, the previous administration reduced VAT by 2.5%. And now we're adding, not increasing the VAT, but adding another tax, of 2.5%. How does that affect, how does that read down to the man, the ordinary man on the street, or the ordinary woman, single parent household that needs to take care of a family of, let's say, 4 to 6 people?
Well, I give the example of the lady who found herself in a position where she literally was begging a stranger to assist her, and therein lies the problem. That 2.5% may not appear to be much for some persons, but the average man on the street, it turns out to be quite a lot, especially when already we already have that, and to have this 2.5% kicking in again, the add-on has gone even beyond what was intended with the original 15% VAT in some cases. Now, the thing we must understand is that a cost is a cost, and as soon as we start to tinker with these things, and we have all the support services for business, if you will, in passing that 2.5% on, the businesses must, once they incur the 2.5% from the government's end, they have to recoup that cost. And those businesses will not be selective in giving it away, in that they're in business to make money. So to the extent that they incur it, they will have to pass it on. And in some cases, it can be quite onerous for the small person at the bottom of the food chain, if you will.
how does that impact small businesses, businesses that have not even met the threshold for VAT, let's say?
Well, they would have to bite the cost of the 2.5%, the levy that's put in at the port, because that's where it comes in initially. Otherwise, government would be hard pressed to collect the 2.5%. So once it feeds into it, if they are not able to pass it on to the customers, the businesses would have to bite that 2.5%.
In a time when things are already so hard, and small businesses especially are suffering from, and I'm talking about food, because food is going to be the bane of your existence. Without food, your citizens, the consumers, I mean, what's going on? We have been in a situation where there's been a number of shortages at the supermarkets, at the stores, and persons have been saying, we hear the government saying it's the war on Ukraine, now it's the Palestine-Israeli war. So food is already a scarce commodity. To your mind, does that impact even further the 2.5% on scarce resources and persons being out of jobs and not being able to make ends meet? From an economic standpoint, how does that augur for St. Lucia?
Well, the thing is, we should really be trying to pick up from a really bad time. If you go back to the days of COVID, you can remember in 2020, literally the world went flat. There was absolutely nothing happening. A lot of people probably ate up some of their savings. Certainly at that time, I think we started to realize the fragility of our workforce, because once the hotels closed, I think that was in mid-2020, we had, 15,000 people from the hotel industry on the breadline, with all the families that go with them. So I think we really started to understand how close the country was in most instances to a case of really, really hard times. We survived only because of the assistance of the NIC. The banks gave a moratoria on loans and so on. But all of these have to come back, especially the moratoria. People have to pay their loans ultimately. But still, there are a lot of people who are out of work. Even in the hotels, they're not back at 100% occupancy. So a lot of people are out there. So there's still a lot of pain out there. And thus, the appeals from the World Bank to assist those persons, our programs really have to go in that direction. Now, I understand that the government collected an additional $70 million in terms of duties. That was money that wasn't there before. But the thing is, government is not in the business of making money. They collect money to be able to deliver services, etc., to the persons of the country. And there's no point in having excesses, surpluses, etc., if the people are starving. So government really has to look again at the way they're applying those things, and let's not be so concerned. While we should be concerned, but let's not be driven with the need or the purpose of creating records in terms of lower deficits and all kind of stuff, but actually go out and see how you can assist people in surviving. I think that's the key thing at the moment, because I say ultimately something else is going to come up, and we have to be ready for that. We know it's going to happen. So we've got to try to allow persons to position themselves well, so they can take care of themselves. It's going to be grim going forward.
Okay, Frank, if I can come in here. I mean, I listened to you and I heard what you said in terms of what it is that should be done to cushion the blow to the ordinary man, or should I say even more so woman, considering most likely in our society that they are the ones who bear the responsibility of taking care of the family. But I'm sure you would have heard our Prime Minister indicate that there's nothing he could do. Do you accept that claim? That there is nothing there's nothing the government can do to ameliorate the current situation as it stands?
I think one of the things he should have done, the government should have done in actual fact, was in a sense try to cut back, if you will, on that excess which they took from the which they took from the economy in terms of duty collections. For example, let's assume the duties were, when you look at all those things that are added to goods coming in, let's say it's about 30%. Okay? If a set of goods worth, say, $100, as pre-COVID came into the island, and let's say the duties were 30%, the government would collect $30 in terms of duty on those particular goods. Now, because of the incidence of supply chain issues, the war generally, the supply and demand, fuel, etc., and so on, supposing the goods, the same goods, the quantity of goods, came into St. Lucia, and this time the price is not 100, but it is say $300 for the same volume of goods. Applying the 30% duty, government would have collected $90. That's for the same goods. Okay? So there is that extra $60 which they would have collected for doing nothing. Literally doing nothing. And eventually, because of that being added on to the price of the goods, that would feed into the people on the ground. So one of the things that could have been done was the rate of duty could have been cut back. The rate of duty either could have been cut back to a lower level, or the 30% could have been applied to the value of the same goods pre-COVID. So in other words, you force the prices down to take the pressure off some of the inflation that we would be getting. There would have been some inflation because you have things like electricity and so on feeding in, but at least you could have been able to get some sort of respite from one of the main drivers of the higher prices, which is happening externally. But unfortunately, the government seem inclined to want to collect that money, that difference that arises from the supply chain issues and so on, and that's not doing good to the people, because in the end, the goods are the same.
Because I wondered to myself, in the last administration, the past prime minister had mentioned about running government like, I want to make sure I use the right word, like a business, not as a business, which means there would be certain policies put in place that would maybe help to ameliorate certain hardships. But then, and he got a lot of flack for that, because I think a lot of people did not understand the difference between like and as. But from what you're saying, it seems as if this government is running like as a business, because you're collecting surpluses, but your people are suffering hardship, and you're not transferring that surplus to the benefit of the people. So what is, in your opinion, what do you think that the government is using that surplus for?
When we speak about surpluses in the end, because there's now the other side of it is that what are you applying it to? But we're not seeing that sense of application. I mean, we still have, I understand, for example, they may have used it in reducing local payables. Maybe that's one particular area. But the thing is, was there a particular need to reduce their payables to such an extent that the people themselves are struggling?
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I kept asking, what was the point of that? And nobody could really answer me, because I remember in one of my courses, and it just everyday common sense, you get a windfall. A lot of people tell you win the lottery, $100,000, $250,000, $1 million. What are you going to do with that money? And a lot of people tend to say, I'm going to pay off all my debts. I'm going to pay off all my debts, and then I start afresh. But when you pay off all your debts, you're back to zero, and you do not have any income, because you're still unemployed, you're still underemployed, you still have a cash flow issue. Is it that our government is using that same T-boutique mentality, pay off all my debts, and then I'm going to figure out what's going to happen later on?
It appears so, but then going back to the IMF and the World Bank, they're inclined to think that you need to take care of those persons. There's an expectation on their part that our debt levels will stay reasonably high as long as we have these conditions out there. They expect that. And for that reason, they have been fairly more liberal than they have been in the past in terms of loans to various countries like ours, in terms of the conditions, the terms, etc., and so on. There's that expectation. That doesn't mean that you should be piling on debts unnecessarily. But the thing is, they're aware that it's going to be high. And St. Lucia never really went up to the sort of levels we saw in other places. I think Barbados at one time was 130% or thereabouts. I think they just started getting to lower levels now. We were in the region about 90%, the debt GDP ratio. It was about 90%, which was not bad in the context of things. Right now, we're probably even lower than that now. But I suppose with all the recent borrowing we have, it's going back up again, and still we ended up in the position where people are suffering. So it comes down in the end in taking care of the people, because you need that ultimately to go forward. Some of the things that were done did not assist. For example, when we had all these projects that were going, that were ceased, all those persons were eventually on the breadline, if you will. And what do? That's what you don't want. This now expands into other areas. Amongst them possibly is crime.
So one can say that we can use an analogy of a credit card. When you have a credit card, you use your credit card to make purchases and whatnot, but especially if you're in dire straits, so you make the minimum payments that you can stave off increasing debt and whatnot, but you use that credit card to get by. And when your discretionary income increases, then you and other primary needs are met, then you pay off that credit card in its entirety. So can we say that?
I don't like the idea of living off the credit card too much, because it's all the most expensive forms of borrowing.
It's true.
But the general idea is probably that. Right?
Very well.
But if I can come in here, I mean, Laura and Frank, you all are engaged there in an economic discussion, but I can see the social aspect of it. Because when I listen to you, Frank, what you are in effect saying is that given the fact that the situation is as it is, people are in dire straits, considering that government was actually generating more revenue than they even budgeted for, you would have thought that some safety net measures would be put in place. I did not expect that bread, for example, which is a staple, which is one of the lifelines for poor people. All poor people depend on bread, especially since it is cheap. I didn't expect that the price of bread would have gone from 25 cents to 45 cents. I didn't expect that the price of fuel, because I remember when the United Workers' Party was in government, even when the prices of fuel went up, it was subsidized to the extent that it stayed at $13.95. I remember at one point under this administration, the price of fuel went to $17.95. Even now it is above $16, despite, as you said, the fall in prices on the world market. Now, I ask myself, when the Prime Minister says that he cannot do anything, but the Prime Minister did in fact do something. He added a 2.5% levy that I would have hoped would have made things better for St. Lucians. Now, I mean, what has happened? He has further compounded the situation by adding that levy. And so when we think about the social dimension, if a government has a social conscience, the additional revenue that is generated, there's nothing wrong with generating extra, more than you projected, but that should have, in fact, as you indicated, gone to the people who are actually suffering. And so let us hope that the Prime Minister will profit himself, the opportunity to listen to the round table and get some ideas, since he has thrown his hands in the air saying that there's nothing he can do. I've always believed that there is something, and you are further confirming that there is what can be done.
But it's rather strange that in times like these, there would be a tax rise. Because, I mean, despite what you call it, it is a tax rise. But in normal budgeting terms, for example, when we looked at the last budget, one of the things one would expect is that you must see some element, if you're fighting a situation like that, you must see some element of attacking your expenses in any business, government, whatever. In fact, I was reading recently in one of these, I think it's Malawi in Africa, where the president has decided that they're going to cut all sorts of things as an indication to the people that they're taking things seriously. So I think if it even goes to travel overseas, he's cut out all travel. When you're traveling, you travel, what's the name? The ones at the back.
Economy.
You travel economy, right? So he's gone, but we haven't seen.
I'd like to also propose
You haven't seen that
number of
commitment.
consultants.
Right, I was just about to say
number of
cut down the
consultants be cut
consultations.
You haven't heard conversation like that at all. I remember Sir John when he was around. He was one that was always gung-ho about cutting expenses to the extent you hear people complaining. He would walk into a room and not see somebody in the room if there was one, and he'd turn off lights, right? Because, and it's this sort of thing that you would have expected to see.
Yes.
Positive attempts to let people see we cutting costs. In the UK during COVID, there was a rule out that you don't fly around. You take the train, right? We've never seen that here. And in fact, we have a lot more travel going on now. And then there's this famous one about the consultancies. I mean, that was so glaring. It has to make you wonder, why isn't there an attempt to cut expenses? Because there must be.
Now, Frank, I just want to add one before Laura comes in. I just want to add one, and I know Frank, you might be tempted to say it's because I'm no longer a politician. I'm saying so. But COVID taught us that many of those conferences and meetings and so on can be done virtually.
Yes.
It was done virtually during COVID. Why don't we continue doing so, which is a far cheaper option than travel?
Yeah.
This is, at this point, we're out of time for our first segment, and so we need to go on break. So we'll put a pin on it there, and we'll see you at.
But before we end, Laura, let us thank Frank, because Frank is unable to stay with us for the other two segments.
That is so true.
But we want to thank him for his insight, his input. We got the perspective, but of course after Frank leaves us, we will still be discussing some of what he said.
I was hoping that I could entice him to stay for the next segment, you know. So I was cutting him off there now and hoping that he would stay for the. But it's so true. It's unfortunate that you have to leave us, Mr. Myers, but we thank you so very much for your input and your insight. And as Spider indicated, we hope that the powers that be are listening and they take a page from what you're saying. At this point, we have to go on break. When we come back, we will deal more with the current affairs of the nation.
My name is Rodriguez Ferdinand, and I'm here on a beautification project concerning beautifying Anstere's Mole Street village, keeping the colors a little brightened so people could actually get a proper view of Anstere when they pass through. The project basically was sponsored by the Parliamentary Rep Dominic Fede, which I accept greatly for his works. I'm actually an Ansterean, and I see works is being done where it's suitable enough, Little Reef content will be gaining from it. Thanks, Dominic Fede. Keep doing what you're doing. We are impressed with it, and we are along with you all the way.
Hi, my name is Dominic Fede, representing the constituency of Ancillary Canneries, and really my candidacy for this election is about bringing out the best in the constituency. We've accomplished some 15 inner community roads together. When I look at the cemetery road and I think of women coming to a funeral in high heels and had to bring 2 pairs of shoes because of the mud. Those days are gone. We built the HRD center and we have had some 200 individuals who have been trained within the first few months of opening. We want to build more houses. We want to help more of you. We want to create more jobs. And some of the ideas that we have include a call center in the constituency where, when completed, would generate some 400 to 600 jobs. When I look at the ancillary waterfront project, the jetty is going to be extended. A mini hotel is already at the ground floor and being built. The square is being redone. There's a restaurant in the location of the old community center building. This is going to transform the ancillary waterfront. The drain around the field has been much talk, and it's been an eyesore, and it has been a source of much discomfort to the people of ancillary. But I am happy to tell you that after fighting hard for it together, we are now in a position where the drain is being built. I'm asking you to support us because I'm convinced that we have the superior vision for St. Lucia. So if you're from Canaries Ancillary, then you know you have to stay with Fede. Let's keep working.
I don't want to hear labor. I don't want to see the labor people. And Herod, he's the man for Sophie. He's the man who should have been there long time ago for Sophie. Because the short time he came there, he had to do so much. And when the labor was there, they never do nothing for Sophie, especially Palmis. They neglect Palmis. But Herod, he's the man. He is the man, and he is the man for future coming.
Welcome back, St. Lucia, to what is shaping up to be another scintillating roundtable discussion. If you're now joining us, welcome. And if you were with us at the top of the hour, thank you for staying tuned. The next segment promises to be a good one. In the first segment, we had Mr. Frank Myers, and he was talking us through the 2.5% levy that the government has now imposed on us. And just for a brief cap, he was telling us that it's egregious at this time to further impose this tax on us, on the populace, even when the dreaded IMF advises against it and is advising us to take more mitigating steps to ensure that the population is taken care of and that measures are put in place to ease the squeeze on the common man, so to speak. In this segment, we have with us Mr. Guy Joseph, former Minister of Economic Development. Guy, what is your take? Just give us a brief synopsis, because you didn't really weigh in on the first segment on what took place prior.
Okay, thank you, and good evening to the listeners and viewers. I also want to acknowledge our viewers in the diaspora. Laura, as you indicated, Spider and Mr. Myers, it is egregious what the government has done in imposing this 2.5% tax. They can call it by whatever name they want. It is a tax. And it is a new tax that never existed in St. Lucia before. Now, the sad thing about it is that tax is being imposed at a worst possible time in the history of this country. We are reeling from the effects of COVID. Businesses have not recovered. Households have not recovered. There are still so many individuals who are unemployed and people who are underemployed. So if you take what is happening in the tourism sector now, when the industry should be at its best, employees are still on rotation, getting 2-3 days work for the week. Construction is down considerably by the deliberate policies of the government. So unemployment is on the rise, and they know that. even if the ILO and the indicators on the social and economic review said you cannot use the new numbers and compare it to any previous numbers because they are using a new method of calculation. And we don't know against what they have based it. So you have these situations where people are making less income and they have to deal with higher prices. So let's look at outside of the 2.5 what transpired. We already had an increase in the price of bread. We had an increase in the price of fuel. We had an increase in bus fares. We had an increase in cooking gas. And then we saw the prices within the supermarkets which skyrocketed over a period of time. Not just as a result of supply chain issues, but I believe that because there is non-monitoring on the part of the government to keep prices at a level of stability. Now, here's the problem that you have. The 2.5 has compounded that situation because now everybody can find justification for increased prices because they're saying, but look here, the government is the one who imposed the 2.5. So the Prime Minister was misleading the country when he said inflation was imported. Certain aspects of inflation we don't have control over, but we have control over the level of charges in fuel. Because I believe the government is making in excess of $4 on every gallon of fuel. We have control over the price of flour because every government back for the last 20 years or more have subsidized the price of flour at the government warehouse. The government said in a year when they collected an excess of $70 million in tax revenue, said they could not subsidize flour by $5 million to keep bread at the price of 25 cents. So for the government, and then you add the 2.5. So it's really, I have to think that this government has a vendetta against the people of this country, because no right-thinking government, and right across there in Grenada, in Barbados, in other Caribbean islands, and I'm not even going internationally what has happened, I'm just looking at regionally. Most of the governments in this region have taken steps to reduce the impact of the high prices on its citizenry. The only government I can see that have imposed a new tax in the midst of rising inflation is this Labour Party government. How do we justify that? There is no justification, because, Laura, if we look at what is there, the government from its projected revenues collected an extra 70 million. And now they are projecting this year, when the levy was imposed, they were looking to collect $33 million for the 3 quarters, which would make it $11 million a quarter. So for an entire year, they would collect 44 million, which means that their excess revenue of 70 million, they expect to maintain. And added to that is another 30 plus million. So the government was looking to collect in excess of $110 million from tax revenues. So you know where this 110 million is coming from? The people of St. Lucia, the poor people, the unemployed, the vulnerable, the working class, the middle class, the upper, everybody is put into the same bracket, which is what the IMF and the World Bank is warning against. There is danger in going down that road because you have to look at the vulnerable people. So you may tell me, what did we do when we were in government? We gave the food baskets. We subsidized electricity. We got the banks to agree to the moratorium. We got the NIC to pay about $70 million it wasn't really a back pay, but it was a subsidy to the people. And those who did not fall within that bracket of being NIC contributors, the government itself raised some money and paid out to help people mitigate the impact of COVID. And I can safely say that we are not over the impact of COVID. The government is over it because the government has collected an excess of 70 million. But the people of St. Lucia have not seen the back of COVID and are still reeling from the impact of COVID.
Now, Guy, this segment is not supposed to be all of this, but you've raised some very pertinent issues. We talked about compounding and my limited knowledge of compounding taxes means that when you have a compounded tax, it means that your end result, the final tax, is way higher than the official tax. So if the official tax is 2.5%, you compound that, it's more likely to be something like what, 5 to 6%?
It depends, Laura. So when we talk about a compounded tax, so when the product is landed at the ports, the CIF price, the duty, and then you add the 2.5 levy, then the VAT is added on top of that. Then let's say these goods go to Peter and Company, and Peter and Company as a wholesaler will now impose its 2.5, well, not Peter and Company, but the government 2.5%,
right,
because they would have to pay it to the government. So they go out, and the wholesale people go out and they sell to a mini-mart in let's say in Mikud. This mini-mart now has paid, Peter and Company paid the 2.5 at the port. They have now added the 2.5 at the wholesale level. Now it goes to the retail. The retail adds another. So that's how many that's free 2.5s we have added already. So free 2s is 6, 7.5. So you already at the compounded. Now it's not, it's added, because by the time they add the markup, the cost of doing business. So when the Prime Minister said this is not going to impact food, this is crazy. I mean, the person from elementary school who went to work at the Ministry of Finance or at the Inland Revenue Department would have advised the Prime Minister, and given the profession that the Prime Minister proclaims, you would expect him to understand how cost is borne in a business, because he has been an accountant doing accounts for many. Well, let's
leave it there.
Doing accounts for so many businesses in St. Lucia, that these are basic things that you would know. The average businessman understands that. How can the Prime Minister of a country,
a business consultant, not understand? But we're going to put a pin in that, because in the third segment, we're going to talk about all the reasons why we should march on the 30th, and we'll come back to that. So let us touch a little bit on this issue that has been really affecting us, and I want to hear more about it. So I want to get a little backseat, because I want to listen to you and Spider discuss the GPH deal and how it relates to Cabot, or how it juxtaposes against Cabot. I want to hear all about those things, and NIC and BOS. So I'm going to hand over to my co-host, Spider, who is going to wrap with a guy with regard to that, and I'm going to take it all in because I need some answers myself. I need some answers.
Thank you, Laura. Well, GPH will not go away in a hurry. So of course, as we explained in our last program, that was the main feature. GPH is Global Port Holdings, a company that operates and maintains and develops ports, that has taken over the ports in St. Lucia, Port Sucre, and Port Castries. Now, we explained last time that taking over those ports means that they have literally inherited cash cows. Based on what Herod Stanislas told us the last time, Port Sucre brings in about over $300,000 a year. Based on what you, Guy Joseph, told us last time, Port Castries brings in the region of $10 million a year. That is a significant sum of money to put in the hands, like money that is readily made, to put in the hands of a foreign company that is investing $40 million for the two ports. Within my calculations, within less than 4 years, $40 million could be made between those two ports. Now, that I think is a serious compromise of our sovereign powers, because your port is a key, a very crucial element in your country's development, and as far as revenue is concerned as well. But having done that, we are hearing many things that have not been confirmed or denied by the government in terms of the inability for us to develop Port View Fort and so on. So there must be something special, Guy, about GPH. Why our government on our behalf would decide, because I as a layman cannot see the logic, but you are Minister of Economic Development, you're in a better position to judge that than I am. There must be something special about GPH that I do not know, that the government knows, and you are in a place in government where you should know too, if that's the case. Why did we make that decision? What is the logic, the sensible, rationale behind that decision? I want you to help me with that.
I am not sure I can tell you how sensible this is or how rational it is. I can tell you that we had discussions with GPH, but before I go and maybe tackle your question to answer, I want to deal specifically with the importance of truth. In this country, too many things pass as being truthful because somebody decide to go on the internet and post something, or somebody decides this is what the truth is, and that's what I'm going to say. If you recall, Spider, yesterday on your show, while you're on What Makes Me Mad, a caller called and said that Mon Pima was sold for, the government bought it for $138 million. Even when I gave you the figures of $15 million, that was higher than what the government paid. For Mon Pima and Shock Estate, that area down there, the government paid $11 million for these two properties. And one of the properties has already been sold for $6 million, and the other one is going to be sold for much more than that.
And coincidentally, talking about the truth, and by someone who should know, Stanley Lucian, the host of the show that I was on yesterday, made a comment when I talked about journalists being consumed by GIS as a reward for their role in the last election. He said that the UWP did the same with Nicole. And it didn't even occur to me then that Nicole had been out of the media for about 5 years before the government came into office, and played no role in the campaign. And even when a caller, an interesting caller, called in to correct, he didn't even acknowledge the fact that that wasn't so. So talking about truth, I mean, we need to clear the air on it, because when truth goes unchallenged, when falsehood
goes unchallenged,
it begins to look like truth.
Yes, so I'm saying this because I want all of us in St. Lucia to understand that we have a responsibility towards ourselves. I have not put my life entirely into the hands of the government. I have certain responsibilities towards myself. I have to inform myself. I have to verify the information that is given to me. And I know for a fact that I cannot trust the information coming from the government. So I must do my own research. And so I went out and I did my research on GPH. And because GPH is a publicly traded company, a lot of information about GPH is available online. So what I'm saying to St. Lucians today can be verified. And if I am saying something about GPH that is not so, then GPH has hired a local PR person. What is amazing about GPH PR.
But let me just warn you, they have a local attorney too.
Yes.
Okay.
GPH has the same PRO that the Labour Party has.
Interesting.
Now,
talk about conflict.
For a publicly traded company, and I'm putting that out there, I know this is being broadcast everywhere. How can the person who was doing PR for the Labour Party all of a sudden land the job of being the PRO for GPH in St. Lucia? And GPH and its international holders of shares see nothing wrong with that, because I have said that there are unethical things that it appears that some of the things, while it may not be illegal, but it appears to be unethical. And any publicly traded company has to abide by ethical rules and standards, because that is what gives you credibility, not just what the law says. So, so to go to the GPH, and Spider, you ask a question that maybe the government would be in a place to answer, but I know they will not answer us. So we have to do our own research and come up. So GPH is just a broker. You see, if you go into the US, Spider, you can go directly to JetBlue and you can buy a ticket. You can go online to the JetBlue website and you can buy a ticket on JetBlue to go to the US. You can go to a travel agent in St. Lucia. You may have to pay a small fee because you don't want the headache of going through the problems of the internet, and sometimes they put you on hold for a whole 20, 40 minutes, an hour. So you don't want that. So you can go to, that becomes the headache of the travel agency. So the travel agency will buy you the ticket. Or you can go on Expedia and you can book your ticket. They will give you the price ranges. So all these intermediaries like Expedia and the travel agency, they don't operate an airline themselves. They are just the broker through which you would go to do your transaction. That is what GPH is. GPH does not own a cruise ship. As far as I last checked, I don't know if since I came on the program, they have purchased a cruise ship. But prior to that, I have not seen anywhere that GPH owns a cruise ship. The people who own the cruise ships that comes to St. Lucia is Royal Caribbean, Carnival Cruise Lines, and there is one third company which I always forget. It's not Norwegian. I'll get it and I'll give it to you. These three companies we were able to enter into an agreement with. Now, what GPH is doing is they are trying to take over as many ports in the region as possible to force the hand of the cruise lines to have to come through them. So far they have control in Antigua. They have 49% shares in Bahamas in which they spent 250 million US for 49% shares. And they had signed an agreement with Barbados, which Prime Minister Mia Mottley has put on hold and said, we want to know what the added value is for Barbados for us to go with GPH. So I want St. Lucians to understand that what GPH is coming to do in St. Lucia is exactly what SLASPA has been doing for the last 50 years or more in this country. So GPH is bringing nothing new to the table. What is more frightening for me, Spider, about this, and Laura, is that I see in 2015, a European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, acquires 11% ownership supporting GPH's global expansion. Now, where am I going with this? If a bank in the UK or in a European bank for reconstruction and development has acquired 11% shares of GPH and supporting them in global expansion, why are they going to our local banks to borrow the money to develop the port? And we have our NIC money in there. The government is a shareholder. So between NIC and the government, they control about half of the bank shares. So in essence, the government is the one, because who owns NIC? So in essence, the government signed a deal with GPH and is now loaning the money to GPH to develop the port.
Stop. Did I hear you say the government entered a deal to give away revenues, that guaranteed revenues, to a broker to then turn around and to borrow that broker money for the expansion?
To loan the money to, because let's look at it.
So I'm giving you money.
The board of directors of Bank of St. Lucia, the government have a couple directors in there, and NIC has a couple of directors. Both entities are government owned. So if about more than 40% shares of the bank is owned between government and NIC, then you have a certain percentage. I am a shareholder of the bank. I am entitled to speak, because when they were selling shares, I bought shares. And for more than 10 years, I didn't get $1 dividend on my shares. While we saw that same bank loaning money to a Belgian company who walked away leaving a debt of over $100 million that the bank had to write off at the expense of the people of St. Lucia. You didn't learn anything from that. You are now going to take our hard-earned money in this country, all the savings of the regular St. Lucians, you loaning it to a foreign company. We don't know the terms and conditions of the loan. We don't know the repayment period. Suppose GPH runs into financial difficulty, or suppose there is a boycott by the cruise ships to say that, look, because we were going to do the project, you double-crossed us. Because the government of St. Lucia had already signed an agreement for the development of a new port in Vieux-Fort, a home porting facility, and all three cruise lines they were jointly financing this. You have double-crossed me. You've gone ahead with the new government. You take over a well-established port, and you want to increase the prices on me to bring my ships there. Who say I have to bring my ships there?
Guy, that's a lot. A lot. absorb and for us to take in, and I'm losing my breath. So I need some time. I need some time to catch my breath. We'll take another break, and when we come back, you'll tell us more about how that can, because I cannot imagine the government cannot subsidize sugar, flour, rice, but they're going into this kind of batem popot, to steal a phrase from Sir John. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, more on the GPH deal and why we needed to march.
Over the past 5 years, every single decision we have taken has been to fertilize prosperity for today and to sow the seeds of progress for our nation 10 years from now. Every budget we delivered, every investment we attracted, every infrastructural project we approved, and those we re-engineered are meant for our children, our future, our St. Lucia. The United Workers' Party. Let's keep working.
Mr. Speaker, so right now, Mr. Speaker, right now, I made a simple statement. I said that the Roseau Dam had not been completed. Very simple. 4 words. I said nothing else. Nothing else. But long story.
Welcome back, viewers and listeners. We are happy to have those of you watching on television, those who are watching online, and we are especially happy to have those of you in the diaspora keeping abreast with what is happening in St. Lucia. And what is happening in St. Lucia is that the United Workers' Party is preparing for the grand protest action that will be taking place on November 30th at 4:30 p.m., where we will have a march from VG Playing Field to the Boulevard, after which we will have a big public meeting. Now, there are a number of reasons. We have heard some of them. We have already discussed some of the economic issues, such as the high cost of living. We have discussed the reluctance on the part of government, or refusal, that is, to take measures to ameliorate the inflation that St. Lucians are experiencing. We have spoken of the imposition of a 2.5% levy on St. Lucians to further exacerbate the high prices that they're experiencing. And there are a few other issues that we will want to touch on in this segment. We also started in the last segment talking about GPH, another burning issue, very controversial and very concerning at that. But we'll continue with GPH because Guy Joseph was in the middle of the discussion on GPH, as well as some of the other reasons why St. Lucians must come out on the 30th of November to participate in this march. So Guy, you were saying to us some disturbing things.
Yes, and I want St. Lucians to pay attention because the cruise lines had in principle agreed to allow for an increase in the price per head for developing the port. So in other words, the cruise lines they were giving the money to the government to pay them for building the cruise. It was their own money paying them through the head tax. I mean, you could not get a better arrangement than that. We are now going to give, we are already collecting $6.50 from every cruise passenger that comes to the island. And as I've said before, $1.50 of that goes to pay solid waste. So when GPH takes over, what happens to this $1.50 US that is going to solid waste? Who is going to now pay? Are we going to drop garbage anywhere, or will there be a new garbage tax imposed on St. Lucia?
Let us hope built into the agreement is that arrangement that they will continue to make that contribution. I don't know. Do you know, Guy?
But from what I'm hearing is that you're giving up $6.50 so that you can collect $4 from GPH? I mean, and the cruise lines had already agreed to give us $10. So in essence, you moving from collecting $10 and maintaining your SLASPA establishment to go in and collect $4 and giving GPH. But St. Lucians need to pay attention to how GPH is making its money, you know.
But hold on, Guy, before you move on to that, you talk about what happens to SLASPA. I want to know what happens to SLASPA. What will become of SLASPA when...
You really want to know, because guys continues to take my breath away with all of those things he's saying.
No.
You're giving up $6 that you already have for $4 and the promise of $10.
Right.
I mean, 6 plus 4 is 10.
Right.
But I don't think that was the math that was intended.
Well, the government has a lot of explaining to do. Unfortunately, they do not think that matters of national interest is our business. But, you know, I just want, but going back to my question, Laura, if all of this is available, SLASPA has been running the pot for almost 50 years, according to Guy. What becomes of SLASPA when we hand over our pots to GPH?
I see unemployment here increasing.
So I will tell you something that is already happening. And I know meetings have been held. And one of the persons who attended the meeting was supposed to submit the presentation, but for some reason that presentation has not surfaced. There are going to be, so if you think the 2.5 is the only increase we are going to have, they have already levied higher prices on the containers that are on the port. And then to keep the containers, because to have both tourism and cruise, that is why the UWP administration under Alan Chasney, we were going to build a dedicated cargo port in cul-de-sac so that we ourselves would have been able to develop Port Castries as a cruise port destination. I mean, we can recall back in the day when Sir John went and took the loan with and you remember how Concreto came to St. Lucia to build that northern part of the wharf. And I was a young boy growing up. I remember the divers used to go down there and everything. And that's how, I think that's how Donnelly got the name Concreto in St. Lucia, because he was one of the contractors working down there. Over the years, we have developed our own capacity and ability to develop our ports. When we need to hire outside expertise, like the expansion of the Point Seraphine berth to be able to take the quantum size vessels. That was done. SLASPA took the loan, a loan of $20 million. And GPH is saying, I am now going to assume that loan. But if you take all the revenue, so who you want to pay the loan? So you really think that GPH is coming to pay a loan for us and they're not making 5 times the amount that they pay in the loan? So if SLASPA has never defaulted in paying its loan, why wouldn't SLASPA continue to pay for its loan? And I wonder the taxi...
Well, that is the other question I wanted to ask, because here is one of the few government institutions that is making a profit. I run a few government institutions under my ministry, under my portfolio. They all operate at a loss. SLASPA is one of the few that is generating revenue. Why are we giving it away? I mean, I know you must be sick of me asking you those questions, but as a St. Lucian, it is of grave concern to us. And somebody must tell us. Well, the government is not telling us. So I guess the opposition will have to be answering the questions.
Here is what I want the port workers. I want them to listen to this. Primary port services, what GPH does. Berthing and mooring, shore services, stevedoring, water supply. So will Wasco now have to sell the water to GPH, and then GPH will sell the water to the cruise ship. The stevedores.
What will become of them?
So will the stevedores now be employed by GPH? And will they keep the stevedores that are there? Now the unions representing these workers. When I said we need more voices, more people need to be vocal. So those who are handling the tugboats that bring in the ships into the harbor, you know, GPH is taking over all of that. So what will be the role of SLASPA?
And Guy, you're bringing
Pilotage
a different dimension
and
there.
towing, and the towing in
Guy,
of
you're
the...
bringing a new dimension there that is of grave concern. Jobs. What happened to the people
Because
working
that's
for
what I'm saying.
SLAPA?
I see unemployment increasing
Yeah.
under this kind of deal. And I cannot imagine that the cruise ships would agree to those kinds of terms.
So if they put a fee, I will tell you what I'm aware that is happening on the periphery of what is. So 25 to 30% of GPH revenue has nothing to do with bringing cruise ships in here or anything. 25 to 30% of it is guest information centers. So you see, like Point Seraphine, if you have a little, like you had Lucian Country Life, you have the various waterfalls and places that people visit.
Attractions.
Attractions. GPH will be in charge of the guest information services. So it appears to me, if you're making 25 to 30% of your revenue, that is 1/3 or almost 1/3 of GPH revenue would be from ancillary services. And here the list of ancillary services: booths selling tickets and attractions. So even the booths where you can go there and do a promotion, GPH is taking over that. Airport transfers, luggage services, travel rental, offices, F&B and public area rentals. That's food and beverage and public area rentals. All of that GPH is taking over, you know. Car parking. So even the car park that is at Point Seraphine now will be under the control of GPH. And that means you'd have to be paying a fee to park there. Advertising and events, other marine vending, cruise centers, etc. 30% of their revenues. All of that locals are now engaged in. So what will happen to the vendors' arcade? Will the vendors' arcade be subsumed into GPH? Will they say that your people out there cannot be competing with us?
But Guy, not so long ago we talked about the HIA project that was stopped, right? And how we lost opportunities for increasing flights into St. Lucia. We lost to Virgin from coming to St. Lucia and a whole bunch of other flights. Are we saying that this is the same way that we're going for the cruises? Because, I mean, all of those things, I'm losing my breath. I'm losing my breath. All of those things that you're speaking about has so many ripple effects. Huh?
Well, Laura, as I've said, if we don't wake up in this country and pay attention to what is happening, by the time a UWP government comes into office, it will be too late to fix some of these problems. And that's why we must take the bull by the horn from now. That is why this match is so critical and so important. From all indications, yesterday we heard that the final deal has been signed with GPH. And the government promised us that they would give us information. I mean, some of the things GPH gets in: restaurants and cafes, taxi services, concierge city map, advertisement, Wi-Fi, car rental parking, bus and transfers, retail sales, shore excursions.
It's interesting.
So what is left for the people of St. Lucia to do. Now, that doesn't mean GPH will not employ St. Lucians, but under what terms and conditions. So the menial jobs will go to St. Lucians, but you would expect that if a company is coming here to do something, they will bring in all the top expertise, pay them, because they will pay government based on the profits that they are making. So they will bring in all kinds of mechanism to show that there's added cost. So where St. Lucian is being paid in EC dollars, they're going to bring the British counterpart and pay them in pounds or euros. So then the profit margin goes down in St. Lucia. So what are you required to pay to the government of St. Lucia? So we cannot allow the government to proceed. Ernest Hille, Philip J. Pierre, and the others are on a track to sell out St. Lucia. And I can disclose on this program that I have information which shows that a statement was made where the land at Bannan was sold, and the statement was that there are two ministers in the government who advised Slasper not to buy the land. Now that is why I'm saying the board of Slasper, and it's not about whether I am in government or not. Any UWP that is in government must call this board of Slasper to account for what transpired under their watch. Because it cannot be that the board of Slasper is going to sit by, allow all of this to happen, and say nothing. And then, because, so are you telling me that the cabinet is making these decisions? Can the cabinet go and sign an agreement for our ports without the approval of the entity that is given to manage? And I was told Hille said something yesterday about me making decision about who should be contractor. I have never had that privilege. I have never spoken to a board member of Slasper to try and influence them in any decision making. And if Guy Joseph did something wrong, I've said to them, they have a special prosecutor now. Let's engage the special prosecutor. Because what is happening in St. Lucia cannot be right. And this paper I have in my hand here on GPH, I want St. Lucians to go online and check for themselves and see what GPH is all about, because the financials of GPH is not the best.
And Guy, you are raising concerns here that are really and truly direct concerns of concessionaires, tour operators, taxi drivers, stevedores, our everyday port worker in St. Lucia, who do not know where their future lie with this deal that the government has entered into. This is serious, and they have to come out and take a stand and ensure that they let their voices be heard and let the government know that we cannot proceed any further under that cloud of secrecy that we seem to be under, and not knowing what the future holds. And and this government has had a history of making bad deals anyway, and for us to be told by a government minister that she went into a secret date and had private discussions, and she cannot reveal what is being told.
And that's concerning Port Soufrière.
Port Soufrière. That's the
egregious thing about this is when I watch GPH expenses, GPH has some ports for 4 years lease they gave them, We've given 40 years. Yes. And that is where they're spending the least amount of money.
40 million.
You have to ask what monkey government went and made that arrangement.
Be careful now.
No,
do not want people to say that. You call them animals.
No. Remember the phrase monkey. Why did Sir John say some cocoa macacree went in?
But these days we are we are ultra sensitive. I think Stanley mentioned that yesterday.
Let me tell you,
when it comes from the UWP, people are sensitive.
It's only a monkey government, because and you know why I want to clarify myself why I said it's a monkey government. that would make a deal. You know the story of the lady who was carrying the bucket of honey, and the honey fell, and she picked up what she could and she left the rest on the ground, and the monkey was in the tree. And the monkey came down and the monkey licked the rest of the honey. But the lady said, "Ça c'est misère." So the monkey said, "Misère really do." Because the monkey thought the honey was the misery. Because the lady said, "Ça c'est misère." So when I say a monkey government, I mean, how can you give a sweetheart deal like this that you have for yourself to somebody else? SLASPA is making tons of money that government get. You can go on the government budget and you will see remittances from SLASPA to the government of St. Lucia.
You know,
Plus SLASPA is paying all of its debts.
It makes me wonder what is underlying this deal that has taken place and who is benefiting apart from GPH, since we as St. Lucians are not benefiting.
So let me tell you where SLASPA is going to be really impacted. SLASPA is the same entity responsible for the entry point at Rodney Bay, the marina, IGY. They are responsible for Marigo. They are responsible for Soufre. They are responsible for Vieux-Fort and Port Castries. They are responsible for George Charles Airport and Uranora Airport. All of the combined income pays for one general manager at SLASPA. You have the different branches that operate. When you take off one of the main revenue earners for SLASPA, Port Castries, and also Port Soufre, and all these funds now start going to GPH, which means that SLASPA's revenues are depleted. Now, if they proceed with the PPP for the airport, which is the direction that they have indicated they want to go, then there's no way SLASPA can keep George Charles Airport open on the revenue that it's generating there and manage Marigo and Rodney Bay and Vieux-Fort. So what will happen eventually? GPH will have to take over, or the new airport authority will take over both airports, and GPH will have to take over every entry point of this country. We cannot afford to risk that, and that is why I am so disappointed that we have a board of professional people at SLASPA who have been tight-lipped, silent. Not one of them have said a word about this thing, which means that they're endorsing it, and the country will have to hold them accountable for serving on a board in the interest of the people of St. Lucia and making such bad decisions.
Now, Guy, I heard you said all of those things. You spoke about Port Castries and Port Soufre, and I'm from the south. What about Port Vieux-Fort?
Well, you know what is said, that Vieux-Fort cannot be developed for the next 40 years.
And we stand for that. People, this is why we have to march. This is why we have to march. Because it cannot be that every time there is a St. Lucia Labour Party government in place, that the people of the South are relegated to the bastard children role. It cannot be. We need to march against this. And at this point, this gives us a good segue into talking about the reasons we need to march. I, for one, am going to march against this because it means that me, my family, my children, my friends, the people of the South are going to be left in the dust yet again.
Now, Laura, before you go, Guy, I just heard Laura give a reason why she's going to march. She's from the south, and she's concerned that her area is being treated as a bastard child. Well, there are other people with concerns, and I know that the National Trust is very concerned about our patrimony.
Are they? But they seem to have taken Momo tablets.
Well,
we haven't heard anything.
Well, we expect to see them at the march.
Well, we hope so.
Because they stand for our patrimony. I do not know to what greater extent you can go to divest our patrimony to a foreign entity than what was done with GPH and our government with Port Castries and Soufre. I expect to hear them stand. You know, I mean, if they could sing Jack don't want me to bathe on my beach for Cabot, I don't know who doesn't want them to have their pot, but they'll have to sing that too. And we expect that hypocrisy be stopped. That agencies do not serve as arms of political organizations. And so yes, we are a political organization, but we're not asking anybody to join the UWP. We're asking people to take a stand on behalf and in the name of our country. Defend our sovereignty, defend our patrimony. And I'm calling on the National Trust, who have always had a voice, I note, who have always had a voice when it comes to development in this country that there are concerns about. There are concerns about this one. Let us hear their voice as well.
In fact, I believe that every port worker, every stevedore, everybody who does business at the port, whether you go there to pick up barrels for people, whether you go and pick up cargo, whether you go and transport lumber out of there, every single transaction at Port Castries will be impacted negatively for St. Lucians with the entrance of GPH into the equation. You see, we can call SLASPA because government. When there's a tight situation, government can say to SLASPA, can you waive the fees on this? Can you do this? Can you do that? When GPH, which is a privately held company, which is profit driven entirely, what they look at is the bottom line. When they are in charge, government no longer has discretionary powers over the transactions at the port. If the cruise ships decide the berthing fees are too high, and I was telling you, I have seen the increase in St. Vincent. And I see Ralph, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent, announcing that the money he is getting from the Saudi Arabia, he's building a new cruise port in St. Vincent.
Oh boy.
So it means that if GPH think that they have leverage in St. Lucia, the cruise ships have the option to go to St. Vincent. And Ralph is already positioning St. Vincent to take over the business from St. Lucia.
And that is visionary. You see an opportunity and you build, you know, often people say luck is where preparation meets opportunity. Ralph is preparing for the opportunity that he sees is going to be created by this GPH deal. And we in St. Lucia, we continue to just give things away.
Now, you mentioned the word vision.
Cash cows,
Laura,
give it away.
You brought up the word vision. That's another reason why I am going to march. I have a government that has not presented a vision to us. If I listen to the Prime Minister, he's busy causing division. We have not heard any plan. He literally says he does not know about matters that are directly under his control. Far less what he has given to his other ministers. And when he does not say he does not know, he bluntly tells us it is not our business. We cannot accept, and of course he has other ministers who will tell you just don't go there, kill it, or it is a secret that they're not going to divulge. Or you have, when you question, for example, the road situation, which is another reason for St. Lucians to march, the Minister of Infrastructure will attack the messenger who comes to say that the road conditions are unbearable and accuse them of abusing young women. You know, that is the kind I'm hearing too, that even someone highlighted the condition of a playing field in Babono.
Oh my goodness, it's horrible.
And the parliamentary representative taking umbrage. You know.
We are fast running out of time. Mr. Joseph, what are some of the reasons that you are going to be marching for?
You know, yesterday, following what happened in the parliament, gave me more reasons to be concerned. It is not just our economy that is under threat. It is not our safety alone. It is not our healthcare alone. But the very Parliament of St. Lucia, where democracy is supposed to be upheld, is under threat. I saw a clipping of the Speaker of the House asking that the cameras be turned off by NTN for him to do what he has to do. Now, who gave Claudius Francis this authority? Who does Claudius Francis think that he is? That the parliamentarians who are elected. Now, you know, somebody sent me an interesting message. He said this is his house. You cannot control your house, but you want to punish the people of St. Lucia by not allowing them to see what is happening in the house. Control the parliamentarians that are seated in the house. And it's not Alan Chasney and Bradley Felix you have to try and control. I see worse behavior than I've ever seen. I see Claudius being overruled. When he has called one person to speak and Richard tell them, man, I tell you not speaking, sit down and keep quiet. And Claudius would not stamp his authority, but you want to tell other parliamentarians who stand on a legitimate point of order to sit down? I mean, since when 180 can be most of 1,000? I mean, for a Speaker of the House, now this is not about Alan Chasney. Alan Chasney can stand for himself. When you tell me, from a little boy growing up on Radio St. Lucia, I listened to St. Clair Daniel as Speaker of the House. I listened to Alan, the late Alan Bousquet, and all of the other. I mean, Fetty was my favorite, Alan Bousquet. Your rep, your former rep, spoke a language that many times Fetty had to tell him, break it down. Because I don't understand the language, the words that you are using. I mean, as a child, our democracy has always been an open democracy. Today, Claudius is going to rule tomorrow morning. If from now on, sittings of the House will be carried out live, so when they sell in the rest of St. Lucia under us, we will not know.
But Guy, this is the very regime who is proud to say that they brought back live hearing of the parliament in the People's Parliament. Remember?
Constitution
Park.
Well, only yesterday, Shazi called the talk show that I was on to say that we did not have speakers outside the parliament for people to listen to what's happening in parliament at the Constitution Park, but they brought it back.
And so you're going to deny the people the very same thing that
but
you are so proud
about it. But the very yesterday, we heard from the Speaker of the House that he is going to terminate broadcast of
when you give a little boy big man's authority and he does not know how to use it. I mean,
be careful now.
I'm telling you, our democracy is on the fret. This is not about Alan Chasney. This is not about UWP. Throughout the years, our parliament sessions, you know that more recently they had gone and edited some of the things that had happened in parliament.
Right.
And I'm saying that these are things that threaten the very fabric on which this society and this democracy is built. St. Lucia has one of the smoothest transitions from one government to another after an election. When one party loses and another one wins, the next day in St. Lucia, you would not be able to tell the difference that there is a change in government. That's how smooth the transition is.
Although, Guy, if your Prime Minister has his way, it will not be so. Because he wants his supporters to go to the UWPs in their face and tell them, you lose.
Right, yes. In this current climate, I fear.
I mean, can you imagine when I tell you this is election. A man without vision but only causes division? That is the characterization of our Prime Minister.
So you ask me about matching. There are so many things. The cost of living, the cost of fuel, the state of healthcare, the unemployment situation, the road conditions, the attack of ordinary citizens by members of the Prime Minister's office. The embarrassments caused to us by the Prime Minister, the GPH deal. I mean, the list goes, the cost of basic food prices.
And the corrupt practices of the government so far, like selling land on the price.
On the price, the Bonanza land fiasco. Yeah. And I hope that we can come to this. So what we are saying to St. Lucians, we're not asking you to come and match because we expect you to vote for UWP.
I am also concerned about the intimidation by government ministers or citizens in this country.
And that's what I'm saying, the threat to the ordinary person,
that's right,
the day-to-day attacks. So every St. Lucian may have a different reason to come out and match. But we want you to come out because what did the Prime Minister say? You accepted the 2.5%. Our numbers must show the Prime Minister we did not accept the 2.5. And we are hoping that as a result, the Prime Minister would go back and revoke the 2.5 by realizing that St. Lucians did not accept the 2.5.
Guy, really, the Prime Minister refused to accept that 100 is nowhere close to 1,000. You think he will revoke the 2.5%?
Well, he said the people accepted it because they didn't protest.
Yeah, but you have to be very careful. The Prime Minister needs to be very careful. That silence does not mean acquiescence. He has to be very, very careful about that because there's an old saying, still waters run very deep.
Yes.
So he may just very well get the surprise of his life. What about you, Spider? Are there any other issues that you want to march for or that you are appealing to St. Lucians to march for? Maybe they have not thought about it.
Well, I mean, generally speaking, all of those mentioned by Guy are of concern to me. I am particularly concerned about the erosion of our democracy. I mean, when I look at the attack on Bradley and more so Alan Chasney, like Guy said, I'm not even concerned about Alan Chasney. He has demonstrated that he can take care of himself and has beaten them at their own game, taken them to court and won them and so on. But that is Alan Chasney. When we allow that to continue, allow that to happen, if they are going to take on Alan Chasney in that way, what about us ordinary individuals?
When we do not
us?
Stand for those they come after, when they come for us,
there'll be nobody to stand
who will
for
stand
us.
with us.
And so we have to all collectively let our voices be heard, take a stand. And like Guy say, I'm also concerned about the embarrassment that we are experiencing as a result of this whole government as a whole, especially the Prime Minister. I am concerned about the crime situation because I see my freedom is in jeopardy. I see my investments in jeopardy. You know, my economic survival and standard of living is in jeopardy. I'm particularly concerned about that.
So I just want to jump in there quickly and say, you know, it is much more than just where we are as a country, because what the government is doing today, for a democracy to do well, its people must be vocal. There's a sellout with most of the media. We see how they broadcast. We see people who are supposed to present the news unbiased and balanced, that they are singing from the hymn book of the Labour Party.
I mean, yesterday, Guy, I had to ask Stanley Lucian on HTS whether he was the PRO for the Labour Party, because I started taking notes. I said, but he's doing such a good job as PRO of the Labour Party. I need to take notes so I can do a better job for UWP.
For UWP. Yeah. And I'm saying this because what we are calling people, it's not a violent march. It is not something that is going to be disrespectful. We want the placards to be properly written. We want it to convey the message you want. Nothing derogatory, nothing insulting.
Nothing indecent.
Nothing indecent.
Oh, by the way, wearing Pampers as a fully clothed person, partaking in your all-mass culture is not indecent.
No,
and there's nothing
indecent.
classless about that.
There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, and I want to highlight that not just the Thursday march and the meeting in the boulevard, but this Sunday we expect to drive around and
a whistle
stop throughout the island to be able to just alert people. And I know a lot of people are telling me that they are afraid. of victimization, and that is the main reason why I believe we need to match. We are already being victimized.
If we are afraid of victimization, we have to come out, match to stop it, because
Right.
it is taking
Because if we don't, and so we call on all sectors of the society. We call on the young people. We call on students. Because this GPH deal for 40 years may not affect me as much as it will affect our secondary school children, and even our primary school children, and the child who was born yesterday. Because by the time this deal would end, that child would be 40 plus years old.
Yeah.
So all of these are reasons. We are calling on mothers to come out with their children. And if you need transportation, let us know. We will arrange the buses to get you there. And for those who would be coming or those who would be staying in town for the match and for the meeting, and you worried about how you get in home, we will make the arrangements. We know the challenges that people have financially and economically, what people are suffering from. We are not paying people to come and match. We want people to come and demonstrate their
right
to have a voice in what is happening in the country. And we've given you, for the last 3 months, we've been giving you reason after reason. I mean, Timothy Mangal gave a good synopsis of, look at what Ralph is doing with his money. Where $50 million could have finished St. Jude Hospital, moved the people from the stadium. The other 100 could have been used to develop podcasteries. You would not have to even go to the local bank to get the money. You are giving that up. You are giving up $400 million for $40 million. I mean, who does that?
And all the secrecy that goes with it, guy. And I'm worried too that we are not finding ourselves where our government is making decisions, entering in deals, signing agreements on our behalf in the international arena, unknown to us. Because I heard somebody mention, the Samoa agreement that was recently brought up. I don't know if it has been signed, on our behalf. But our government needs to let us know what is happening, what is their position, and what is contained in that agreement as far as our benefit is concerned. And you see, all of those things, we cannot just let the government within their clique do what is in their personal interest and personal aggrandizement and forget about us as a solution. Because we see, while they talked in opposition about empowering St. Lucians, they are destroying local institutions and taking empowerment from St. Lucians. We see that they are selling out our patrimony, because look at what they're doing with our ports.
Yes.
And what kind of agreements do they negotiate on our behalf? We want to know. It is our business. You talk about transparency and accountability. You have to account to us, and you have to be transparent in what you do.
Well, this is where we run out of time, and it's a good place to stop. And anybody who wants to know more about why they need to watch, they need to take the whistle stop, because I mean, there are so many reasons, and I listened to both of you, and even from the top of the show when we had Mr. Frank Myers with us, there are insurmountable reasons for us to march. St. Lucians, the real tax rate is not 2.5%. As Mr. Joseph explained to us, it's more like 7.5%. You need to march for that. This is egregious. There is no direct levy on food, as they say, but at every stage of the journey, from supplier to wholesaler to retailer to consumer, there is the levy is being applied. There is a levy on food. Don't let them fool you. That is egregious. You need to match. Okay? There's a threat on democracy, and both Mr. Joseph and Mr. Montut eloquently spoke about what happened in the House yesterday. This is egregious. We need to march. The disrespect shown towards women by the very same ministers who were voted into office to represent them is egregious. You need to march. For disregarding our health care for so long, disregarding our future needs by being myopic, is egregious. We need to march. When journalists know more than sitting parliamentarians about secret deals on secret dates, it's egregious. You need to march. And when ministers flaunt that police officers are feeding them information on private citizens, this is egregious. You need to march. And the list goes on and on and on, and we can be here for the rest of the week listing reasons why we need to march. 17 men and women cannot do it all for you. At some point, you need to stand up and take your destiny into your own hands and march. Speak up. Now is the time. Thursday, November 30th, let your voice be heard.
Very good wrapping up, Laura. There's not much left for me to say except for me to make that call. I want to sound the SOS. Save our St. Lucia. Come out and march. Now, having said so, I'm not sure, Laura, if we will have a round table next Thursday, but we will let our viewers and
we might just switch
know.
the dates.
We'll just switch the date. We'll inform them of when that will take place. But because Thursday there's that all-important protest action, the march that will be taking place, and everything else has to take second place to that. That will become precedence. SOS.
Save our St. Lucia.
Thank you.
And I'm saying, and I'm asking everyone to watch what they eat and eat what they watch. Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Wait, first of all, you're not going to speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Watch what they eat and eat what they watch.
Over the past 5 years, every single decision we have taken has been to fertilize prosperity for today and to sow the seeds of progress for our nation 10 years from now. Every budget we delivered, every investment we attracted, every infrastructural project we approved, and those we re-engineered are meant for our children, our future, our St. Lucia. The United Workers' Party. Let's keep working.